When a shopper places an order, you have one shot at winning them as a lifelong customer. I'm Al Coe, CEO of ShipStation. I'm obsessed with ShipStation being the most reliable and efficient way you can ship. At ShipStation, our promise is to make shipping easier for e-commerce business owners. We're focused on providing the most integrations with all the places you sell and automating manual tasks to make fulfillment easier for your team. We partner with all the major carriers to make sure you get the lowest possible rates because every dollar counts. So no matter what you're sending or where you're shipping to, ShipStation can get it there fast and keep your customers happy. See for yourself how ShipStation can reduce the time and effort you spend on order fulfillment. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Season 13 of Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. Joining me this week on Coach's Corner is my good friend and PGA professional, Jon Decker. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in just a moment. Just a couple of program changes this evening. We were going to have a travel section tonight. Unfortunately, our guest had a scheduling conflict, so he's not going to be on, but he is going to come on next week with my good friend, travel expert, Robert Kaufman. But we are going to be joined a little bit later on by my featured guest, Mattingly, the Executive Vice President of Landscapes Golf Management. He's going to be joining me on the second half of the show. Just a couple of quick announcements as well. Don't forget, if you want to see all of these broadcasts, you can go to the iGolf Sports YouTube channel, or you can also catch them on Spotify. If you're interested in just hearing the audio version only, not a problem. You can go to Spreaker.com. All of the previously aired shows for Golf Talk Live, as well as the current ones there in their audio format, are available at Spreaker.com, or basically wherever you listen to podcasts, you can catch the audio versions there. But I'm glad you joined us tonight, and we got a lot to talk about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my friend Jon, bring him on the show. I know most of you are probably familiar with him, and then we'll get into tonight's discussion on the Coach's Corner panel. So Jon, of course, is the Director of Instruction at the Medallion Club up in Columbus, Ohio. He's also a senior contributing editor and a top 25 instructor with Golf Tips Magazine. And he was also the 2015 Southern Ohio Teacher of the Year and author of two great books, Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game, and Fairways to Heaven, One Shot at a Time, which also coincidentally happens to be the host of a podcast with the same name. We'll talk about that more a little bit later on. And he's also available for public speaking upon request. So, Jon, welcome to Golf Talk Live's Coach's Corner.
Yeah, thanks for having me on tonight. Looking forward to it.
Not a problem. I apologize for apologizing to the Lord for messing up the title, but that's what happens when you got too many accolades. And I've got to try to get them all in.
Yes.
But we'll recap that a little bit later on as well and get it right the next time around. But thank you as always, Jon. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and we're going to talk about a number of different things. But one of the things is a lot of big mistakes, I think, that amateur golfers tend to make. And one of them is, and this is kind of something that probably a lot of people don't think about. I know you do, but a lot of our amateur golfers don't think about. And they tend to really not spend a lot of time really doing anything on swing maintenance. And what I mean by that is they just sort of get up there and hitting balls, and they don't really think about their swing at all and how they can work on it and try to improve it. They're just sort of going through the motions a lot of times. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and then I'll throw some thoughts in there as well. But I think working on your swing maintenance and getting it down right to the way that works best with your body is something that we can all do from time to time. But a lot of amateurs seem to neglect that. So what are your thoughts here?
That's a great point, Ted. When you go to the driving range, you want to have a purpose. If you're getting ready to tee off and you're warming up, that's different than if you're working on your golf game. So when I'm playing in a tournament or just going out to play a casual round of golf, my main focus is just to loosen up my body, hit shots, do some stretching, light stretching, and just get a feel for my swing and what I'm trying to do. If I'm working on my game, then I'm going to be using alignment sticks. I'm going to be really focusing on, I might video my swing. I'm going to be focusing more on the mechanics. The idea, though, is that you have a purpose. I like to tell my students, you need to define why you're there. And when you define why you're there, then you need to make sure and stick to that lane. Don't warm up and then 15 minutes into your warm up say, I'm going to try this swing tip that I saw on YouTube last night. That's not the time to work or tinker with your swing. So, it's good to have a purpose. I think every tour player pretty much has some sort of thought of what they're trying to do in their golf swing. But what we don't want to do is make that thought turn into paralysis to analysis where we're thinking about too many things. So what I always try to do in my own game, and this is something that I try to also pass on to my students, is make sure that whatever I'm doing mechanically, I'm always doing it in relationship to the target. I'm not getting so focused on a position. It's an overall motion, an overall feeling and I always want to be turning and facing the target. If you're going back and holding yourself in one position and looking at yourself, I think that's when you start really getting too mechanical in the swing, and then that usually does not translate very well on the golf course.
Yeah, well said. And just a couple things I want to add to that. You're exactly right. I think you have to, when you're going there, you want to be practicing with some sort of purpose. And one of the things that I want to differentiate for people is there's really two times that you're going to go to the golf course. There's one, you're going to go there to actually in preparation to playing around. So you're going to go there and you're going to warm up a little bit. And then there's a time when you're going to go, whether you're working with your coach or whether you're on your own, where you're actually going to work on specific fundamentals and things. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But aspects of your golf swing. So you're going to work on your game and make whatever adjustments or changes at that time. You don't want to do that during a warm-up. You want to do that in a practice session, going to your point. So you want to have a sense of purpose. You don't want to overemphasize on too many things. And if there's certain things that maybe your coach has said you need to work on, that's the time when to do it, not right before you're about ready to go out in the golf course. That's a warm-up session where you're just getting loose and kind of getting things. And whatever you happen to have that day, whether it's a big old banana ball or whether you got a snap hook, you might have to deal with it and make it, some minor adjustments, but you don't want to be tinkering around at that point, because otherwise it's just going to be a really bad round. So, for me, what I try to do is I try to get my students to identify, okay, is this a practice session? Is this when I'm going to work on some of the mechanics and things that I need to be working on? Or am I just getting ready to head out to the golf course? And once I decide, okay, what it is that I'm going to be doing is going to dictate what I'm actually going to do when I'm at the golf course. So I think those are things. And as far as the swing maintenance is concerned, I think you have to be out there. And even if you can't make it to the golf course, go out in the backyard when the weather's a little bit warmer. I mean, you're up in the north there, so I know it's still a little bit cool some days, but you can get out and otherwise, or you can just, mimic it inside in front of a mirror and just sort of practice the feel and the motion of the golf swing and just sort of ingrain that in your sort of physical being and your thought process as you get ready to begin a new season. But yeah, you can overdo it a little bit too much, and you got to be careful of that. The other thing I want to get you to talk a little bit about, you sort of led into it, is a lot of golfers tend to neglect the fundamentals. Nicklaus famously, and we've said this many times on the show, Nicklaus talked about how important it was each season when he came out that he went over all of the fundamentals. As stellar of a player as he was, as many majors as he was, the fundamentals were important at the beginning of the season as they were in the middle and the end of the season for him. What are your thoughts here, and how do you get the students motivated to be working and focusing on those fundamentals to make sure they're sound?
Well, that's a great point, Ted, because, Jack Nicklaus has won 18 majors, and arguably, in my opinion, he's the greatest player, if you base it on record, to ever play the game. And he said that every spring, the first thing he would do would meet with Jack Grout. He would say, look at my grip, look at my ball position, look at my distance from the ball, because tour players, just like all of us, fall into bad habits, especially when you lay off, and think about back when Jack Nicklaus was playing, he was probably done, sometime in late September, early October. He wasn't playing in November. He wasn't playing in December competitively. And then in January, that's kind of when, the tour kind of would get started back up. And so even for a player like that, when you've laid off for 2 or 3 months, you're liable to fall into some bad habits. And so it's important with all of my students. The first thing that I look at with any student is their grip. And the second thing I look at is their ball position. To me, those are the most important 2 things that go on in the setup. And I say this with every student I teach. I'll never teach you to have a perfect swing, but I will teach you to have a perfect setup. And so we're always working on the setup. So I would encourage the listeners out there to go to your local PGA golf professional. And even if you're not someone that takes a lot of lessons, it is worth once a year having a lesson, say, I want you to look at my setup, maybe film my swing if you want to see your swing, but really look at my setup to make sure that I have the setup proper. Because if you don't have a good setup, you're never going to have a good golf swing. I've never seen a great golf swing with a bad setup.
Yeah.
I just never have it. You have to have that first. And it's the most important thing. It's really the most important position. Everyone talks about impact, but impact is not a position. It is part of a sequence of events. The only position really, that the 2 positions in golf are the setup and the finish. Those are the ones where the club is completely, stopped moving. And so you got to get that set up first. And so to me, that's where this time of year, that's where you should be, working on. And don't just do it for the full swing. Go look at your putting setup, look at your chipping, your bunker, all of these different things, because if your ball position has moved around, it's going to start affecting your golf swing.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I think you'd probably agree, it's important to incorporate working with fundamentals. It's not just something you do at the beginning of the season, you sort of forget about it. It might be something that you might want to spend a couple of minutes each time you go to the golf course when you're going there, whether it's a practice session, even for a warm-up. I mean, you don't want to be making drastic changes, but you want to make sure, am I gripping the club correctly? Is the ball position where I need it to be today? I'm getting ready to play in 20, 30 minutes. And again, you don't want to be making any major changes, but I think it's important throughout the season to be still always sort of checking your fundamentals, if anything. So how would you say, if you were going to work with a student and let's say they were going to spend 30 minutes a couple of times a week, how much time, if any, should they be dedicating to working on their fundamentals of that 30-minute practice session?
Well, I heard an interview with Tiger Woods when he was working with Butch Harmon. At the time, he was the number 1 player in the world. And they asked him how he was in the Golf Talk studio, or the Golf Live studio there in Orlando. And they asked him, how much time does he spend on his setup? And he said, about 2 hours a day. And I was blown away, absolutely blown away. He said he looks at his setup. That is where he spends the majority of time. He already has a good golf swing, but you can't, if you don't have the setup perfect, then you're never going to have that, a great swing. And I don't know if he was exaggerating in that and I'm sure he was hitting balls. He wasn't just standing there in a static position for 2 hours. Sure. But every time he would look at his swing, that was what he was focusing on, is, do I have the setup right? Because keep in mind, you're on a perfect lie when you're taking a lesson. You're on a level tee box, unless you're out on the golf course doing a playing lesson. And we all know that when you get out there, you're going to get all kind of uneven lies. So I think in a 30-minute lesson, you ought to, at a bare minimum, focus, 5 to 10 minutes on just your setup. And you can do that by looking in a mirror. You can do that by having someone film your swing. You can do that by having a teacher stand there and tell you whether you're doing it right or wrong. But it's definitely worth getting that grip right is where it all starts.
Yeah, and that's something, too, you can work at home when you don't have your coach around. Once you kind of – and that's where, having some video handy that when you're at home, you can put it on your phone or on your computer, and you can kind of review that when you're not around your coach or your teaching pro, and you can kind of look at some of those things. Once you've been taught to set up properly, you can say, okay, that's what I've got to do. And then you maybe get in front of a mirror when you're at home. When you're at the golf course, of course, you have, maybe your coach on hand to help you through that. But I agree. I think, certainly a minimum of 5 minutes if you're just in a regular practice session. If you're in a longer session, again, I don't necessarily think you have to spend 2 hours as Tiger does, but then again, he's won 15 majors. So, he's certainly made good use of his time. But I think when you're out there for at least 30 minutes at a time, certainly at least 5 minutes minimum, maybe 10 minutes, as you suggest, would be worthwhile. This one here, Jon, is something that you don't hear too much about, or people don't really think about, but it's another mistake that a lot of our amateur golfers make. And they typically only look at the yardage to the pin when they're coming to their approach shots. They're just thinking about the yardage to the pin. They're not looking to see what the yardage to the front of the green or the back of the green is. And there, certainly other positions, maybe there's bunkers and things like that. They're certainly focused on one yardage, and that's to the pin. And a lot of times that might not bode well for them. When you're with a student and you're, working on their game out there on the golf course, when you're doing a playing lesson and you're working on things like approaching the green, what are some of the stats you're wanting them to look at? What information are you wanting them to gather so they can make an informed decision on what shot they're going to be able to play?
Well, the first thing that you want to look at with any shot is where you can't go. You've got to look at the trouble first. So that's one thing. But the first, when it comes to yardage, I'm looking at to the front of the green. I want to know my carry distance to the front. You'll hear when the microphones are up there on those players and then their conversations with their caddy, they'll say terms like, 152 to cover. And they basically mean to cover the bunker or to cover to the front. If it's over trouble, it's to cover. If it's to like the front, then they'll say the front. So you want to know the distance to the front of the green. You want to know the distance to the pin. Obviously, if I'm hitting a pitching wedge, my ball is going to react differently when it hits the green than if I'm hitting a 4-iron. And then they want to know the different distance to the back. Then the next thing that I want to look at is the distance from the pin to the left and right. Yeah. Because if I've got 30 feet to the right of the pin and I've got 6 feet to the left of the pin, then my target is not the pin. My target is to the right of the pin. And so you have to understand that you're, in this, even the best players in the world are not hitting shots at the flag every single time. And so Tiger said, and I heard he said this in an interview, he goes, I always play aggressively, but I have a conservative target. Mm-hmm. And that's a great way to think about it, because if my target is 15 or 20 feet right of the pin, that means I'm moving away from the left side of the green. That's going to take a lot of pressure off of me. I'm going to be like, okay, I've got plenty of room. I'm not aiming where I'm going to run it, the risk of missing it to the left and short-sighting myself. And so I'm going to be much more able to go ahead and free up and make a good golf swing. But if I've got 6 feet of pin to the left of or 6 feet of green to the left of the pin, and I'm going at the pin, now all of a sudden I've got a lot of anxiety, a lot of nerves. And that's something that you don't want to do. A perfect example was Bryson DeChambeau at number 11 in the Masters when he hit it in the water. He should have never, ever, ever hit that shot. And it cost him any chance of winning the tournament because that is the hardest, most difficult hole in the golf course. And that is a pin you cannot take on back left. And he did, and he hit it in the water, and that was it for him. So, aggressive play means having a conservative target and an aggressive swing. And if you do that, you're going to do a lot better on the golf course. Yeah,
you want to minimize the risk as much as possible, and you want to play to your percentages. And I mean by the strengths of that. If the shot that you're looking at, as an example, if you have a very low percentage of success, then that's a shot you need to step away from. And as you're pointing out, if you've got very little green to the left of the pin, or right for that matter, then if you're aiming at the pin, you're now increasing the likelihood, if you miss it to the right or the left, whichever the short side is, you're running the risk of now turning what could be a good shot into a bad shot potentially, because you don't know what's on the left. In that case, like as you point out with Bryson, he had water on the left, and it was a tight pin to the left side of the green. Yeah. And, a few seconds later, splash in the water. And now he's looking at, a whole different number than what he was originally looking at. So yeah, you're exactly right. You need to understand where the where you want to place your shot. You need to know the various yardages, not just to the pin. You need to know to the front, and again, depending on the club you're going to be using, you may even need to know to the back of the green, and obviously left and right, and where the trouble is, what yardage is going to take to carry certain, whether it be a bunker or whether it be water, whatever the case may be. You need to have that information. Here's another one that sort of goes hand in hand, and I think a lot of amateurs make this mistake as well, is they treat their maximum yardages as their stock. Yeah. So, they're maybe flushing their 7-iron 160 yards at the best, but realistically, maybe they're only hitting it 150 most of the time. But they're thinking, okay, I can hit my 7-iron 160 yards, but that's when they're hitting it really solid and really flushed. So that's their max yardage that they're hitting it, and they're treating that as their stock yardage. Where's the mistakes here?
Yeah, that is the recipe for disaster. That's you cannot play to your maximum yardage unless you are at a really elite player and you're really swinging well, and your game is that that finely tuned that you can do that. But even the tour players are allowing themselves a little room for error. And when you're swinging really well, that's different. But for the average golfer out there, you need to make sure that you're playing more to the average. And so if you look at your best shot, let's say we'll just use a 7-iron, for example. Let's say that your best 7-iron will go 150 yards, and your average 7-iron goes 140 yards. And if you hit a really poor shot, it might go 130 or 135. Then obviously, if you've got a 145-yard shot or 150-yard shot over water, then you may want to consider going to a 6-iron. Yep. Or you may want to consider playing away from the water, depending on where the water is. That's a situation where you're better off to take more club and go too far than to come up short. If the trouble's long and you're 150 yards away and you're from the pin and the trouble's over the green, then absolutely. Then in that situation, you can hit a 7-iron because there's no trouble or there's no penalty if you do happen to hit a 135-yard shot. You're just in front of the green, and that's a reasonable miss. Not every shot's going to be perfect. And then for those of you out there that are playing up here in the north where it's cool and the ball's not going anywhere, I went out and played a few holes today, and a perfect example is I had a shot today where it was 177 yards to the pin. And but I was hitting into the breeze, and it was wet. And I played it like it was I told myself, I'm going to play this like it's a 185-yard shot. And went ahead, instead of hitting a 6-iron, which I normally would hit, I hit a 5-iron and hit it very well and knocked it up there pin high on the green. And I was happy and proud of myself because I didn't get sucked into, I know I can hit a 6-iron this far. I went ahead and just accepted the fact that I can't do anything about the temperature. I can't do anything about the wet conditions I was playing in. I went ahead and took more club to make sure and cover that distance.
Yeah, and there's so many other factors that can play into that. You might be looking into a headwind, or you might have a wind left to right that's going to affect your ball flight and your distance. So yeah, you've got to understand the average that you're hitting it, and people look at it as where the ball comes to rest as the yardage, but it's really not. It's how far are you carrying it. So if you're hitting it and you're only carrying it 135, but maybe it rolls a few extra 5 to 10 extra yards depending on the lie. You don't add those extra 10 yards as your carry distance. Yeah. So, you got to be, so that's smart. The example you gave for yourself is very smart, is you played to your strength. You said, okay, I know I can hit, in the best of circumstances, I know I can use my 6-iron here, but because of the circumstances, I'm going to use a 6-iron or a 5-iron, and make sure I'm going to get there. And obviously it paid off for you. So, hopefully you
I missed the putt though.
Yeah, well, I was going to say hopefully you
I two-putted,
the deal, but that's all right. You still give yourself a chance. If you hadn't have done that, you might not at least had that chance. So
that's right.
But so here's another one too, John, that I want you to touch on a little bit. And we see this a lot, especially with some of our shorter shots, and it could be pitch shots, what have you. Is we'll often see a lot of amateurs take a very long backswing. And that creates a myriad of problems because they're coming way back with the club. Maybe it's only 85 yards. They're coming way, way back. And what ends up happening is they decelerate on the way down because they know they're gone too far back.
Yeah.
So how do you develop consistency with that? How do you know? I mean, again, it goes back to knowing your yardages and understanding it, but how do you balance that out to make sure that you're not going too far back where you have to decelerate and then obviously end up a whole myriad of problems come up? So talk about some of the issues that brings by having too long of a backswing, and what's your sort of theory or recommendation on how you can sort of help to deal with that?
Well, by far my favorite part of the game to practice and to execute is the wedges. I love hitting wedge shots. And so when I hit wedge shots, I try to always balance my swing. And so for the listeners out there, take your pitching wedge and maybe make a waist-high backswing and a waist-high follow-through and see how far your ball goes in the air. See, and just pull out a rangefinder and just start, really, it's not going to go as far as a normal shot. And then make a little longer backswing and then a little longer follow through and then a full backswing and a full follow through. And start learning to make different swings when you're using your wedges, when you're playing inside of 100 yards. It's important to understand that whatever you do on the backswing, you want to repeat on the follow through. So if you're going all the way back, you better be coming all the way through. And so, like you said, deceleration happens a lot inside of 100 yards, especially when you start getting in putting and chipping around the greens. You see people stop. And the biggest reason is because the student or the player is trying to hit the ball instead of swing through the ball. And look at the Masters. Rory did it on 13. It was a perfect example. I don't know his exact yardage, but he couldn't have been more than 80 to 100 yards from the pin, and he was supposedly aiming way left of the pin, and he didn't commit and did not accelerate and go through the shot. He left it open and hit it obviously in the water, and it could have cost him the tournament. Thank goodness it didn't. So even at the highest levels, you see this, and it's because what happens is in my opinion, a lot of this is mental, because we feel like we want to try to control the club to the ball instead of allowing the club to swing through. And when you get tense and you get tight and you start swinging to the ball, a lot of times you'll stop and you'll decelerate.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Yeah, I remember that, and I was thinking the exact same thing when Rory was on that hole and it went out to the right, and I was thinking, God, this is going to be bad if he doesn't. Yeah. Unfortunately, he made good on it, but it could have been that could have literally, just like you were talking about earlier on number 11 for Bryson, that could have been the nemesis for Rory on that hole if he wasn't able to clean it up, shall we say? But something interesting, and I remember there was I'm going to age myself now, but way back there was a series of videos that came out, and I remember the late Payne Stewart, Craig Statler, Tom Kite, I think Fuzzy Zeller. There was a whole group of them that did a series of videos together. And there was a video that Tom Kite was involved in. He was talking about the short game. And of course, Tom was one of the earlier players at that time on the PGA that really started incorporating multiple wedges. In fact, he was one of the first on the tour. I wouldn't say the first necessarily, but certainly among the first to have 4 wedges in the bag. And one of the things that was really interesting that he talked about, he said what he did is when he practiced is whatever wedge, let's say his pitching wedge, he would use the same swing on that pitching wedge, but if he needed to draw it back 5 yards or he needed to increase it 5 yards, his way of doing it is rather than manipulating the swing itself or shortening the swing, he would swing the exact same, but he would choke down on the club, and that would be just enough. So he might choke an inch down, maybe an inch and a half, depending on what the yardage he needed. And he did that with all of his clubs. And, people forget that. And you see a lot of times what you'll see out in the practice tee, you'll see somebody hitting their full wedge and they'll say, I need to hit it half the distance. And they try to shorten the swing and they're getting stabby at it and yet Tom just said, you know what, I'm just going to shorten my grip, but I'm going to use the same swing. Maybe I might have to change the club in some cases, but that's what he would do. And I mean, he was pretty stellar with his short game, as you recall. So, but I go back to some of these old videos. I mean, they were on VHS. So that's, like I said, it shows you how far back it is. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you could probably find them somewhere. Somebody's probably uploaded them, but that was another way that he dealt with it was simply making adjustments in how he gripped the club by choking down, as opposed to actually changing and manipulating his golf swing. So it's just something I wanted to throw in there. I think a lot of players might benefit from something like that. Again, it may not work for everybody, but it was certainly successful for Tom in his career. Here's one that I think a lot of people too, John, don't really think about. Now, there's obviously situations where you're going to want to have the club face square, and if you might even have to shut it a little bit. And I'm talking about bunker shots. Quite often what you do is you see a lot of players not opening the club face, especially on a greenside bunker. They're not utilizing the bounce of that club, and they're ending up either the face is completely square or they've even shut it down a little bit, thinking that that's going to help them get underneath the ball. And that clears a whole myriad of problems. Obviously, there's situations where you might have to do that if the ball is plugged or up against the lip where you just need to pop it out. But that's one too. Do you see that as well with some players where they're not really opening up and utilizing the club face itself for with the sand wedge? What are your thoughts?
Yes, the bounce of the club is really there to help you. It's there to help the club slide through the sand. You don't want your club to dig in the sand unless your ball is buried. That's when you want your club to dig. So if you square the face, or if you square the face and put your hands in front of the shaft and have a lot of forward shaft lean, you're not going to be a good bunker player. You're going to go under the ball. You're literally going under the ball too much, and you're not going to get it out. And then every now and then you're going to catch the ball and you're going to hit a long shot. So you want to be coming in when the ball's sitting up on the sand. You want to be coming in shallow. You want to use the back of the club or the bounce. And to do this, the easiest way to use the bounce is to open up the face. Now, the key to opening up the face is to open up the face and then take your grip. You do not take your grip and then open up the face. If you do that, that's not the right way to do it. So you open the face. I call it, when I have three different ways that I'll look at the club face. 12 o'clock, where the club is literally straight up and down. If for a right-handed player, if I turn it to 1 o'clock, that's going to be an okay lie to a medium lie to okay lie. I'll open it to 1 o'clock. If I have a good lie, I'll open it up to 2 o'clock. And so I have, the more I open that face up, the more the club will slide. The more I square the club face up, the more the club will dig. But I never want my hands in front of the ball. My hands, in fact, if I want to hit it higher, are going to be behind the ball. This allows the club head to go past the hands, giving me maximum loft, maximum spin, and a maximum height on the shot.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you stop to think of these mistakes that we're talking about, how common they really are with a lot of our amateurs. And what people don't realize is, when we think about some of the ones that we've just talked about, and there's a few more that we're going to get to here in a moment, is when you start adding all of these up and you look at the different things, not working on your swing, not really focusing on the fundamentals, and then, not understanding how to, figure out the yardage besides just to the pin. And you go over the course of your round and you apply those theories and those mistakes to your round, you're probably losing a lot of strokes in the grand scheme of things. You're not losing strokes to one issue in most cases. It's several issues throughout. So it could be poor mechanics with the fundamentals. It could be, not addressing the yardages, maybe not factoring in how far you're actually hitting each of your clubs, not understanding that. So when you start putting these together and you start really assessing your round and really digging deep into it, a lot of the strokes that you're losing and why so many people struggle to break 100, a lot of these things fall into that. So you might lose a couple of strokes under each of these categories. When you start tightening those things up and working on them, suddenly those strokes start disappearing and your scores start to come down. So that's why, I want to talk about these things, as much as possible to get people to sort of ingrain this. It's kind of like a mental memory, if you will. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know if I focus on these things, I'm going to be able to shave a couple of strokes, because there's no magic sauce. There's no waving of a magic wand that's going to make somebody better. You've got to actually put some effort into your game, but you have to understand what it is that you want to work on specifically and how to do it successfully. And as you pointed out earlier, practice with a purpose in order to be able to do that. And if you're just sort of willy-nilly going out there each week and not really focusing on anything and not addressing some of these issues, then you're never going to improve, and you're just going to continue to be frustrated. So just a couple more here, and then we'll get a chance, as I said, to talk about your books and your podcast and that. But this is another one too that often we see, and that is really, believe it or not, people focus or fail to focus on keeping the ball in play. So what I mean by that essentially is they're so hyper-focused on hitting specific shots. I've got to get it in two. I've got to do this. And sometimes what could be instrumental, just getting that ball back in play and setting yourself up for a better third shot perhaps, might be the smarter play. But no, I got to go for the green. I've got to make sure if I get it in two, I'm going to increase my chances. But their skill level may not do that, or their situation may be where they're not going to be able to get back on track if they don't get the ball back in play. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, when I was down in Florida over the winter, I was trying to play a little bit, work on my game, and I went out and I'd gone from playing a lot up here in Ohio, and then I had a long period where I wasn't playing. And when I went out on the course, there was a couple of situations where I was in the trees and I was just trying to get the ball back into play. And I didn't hit a good recovery shot. I hit the tree and I ended up having to take an extra shot to get out. And it made me realize that when you lay off those little shots that you never, ever practice, no one ever practices those. And I always encourage my students before tournaments. And I'm playing in a tournament I've got a tournament on Monday. And one of the things I'm going to do over the weekend is just take a few minutes to hit what I call recovery shots. I'm going to do it on the driving range, and I'm going to hit with a pitching wedge some little punch shots where that I'm just trying to, like if I'm in the trees and I've got to punch it out to get back in the fairway, I'm going to practice it. Yeah. I'm going to practice a little shot where maybe I take a 7-iron and I'll hit a low punch to the right, that slices to the right, and one that'll hook to the left, in case I need to hit any of those shots on the course. Because if you wait till you get to the golf course to do it, then you're in trouble. The other big problem I see people make when they get on these in the trees and in recovery shots is they'll pull out a 4-iron or something like that, and they'll say, I don't use this club. And I'll say, why do you have a 2-iron in your bag? Or why do you have a 3-iron? Oh, that's what I use to get out of the trees. And I was like, no, you need to get rid of that club. You can accomplish the same thing with a 7 or 8 or 9-iron. You just put your feet close together, you choke down on the club like you were talking about earlier, you lean to the left, and then you just make a small, chipping type motion, and you'll hit a shot to get back out, into play. So I think those are the kind of shots that no one really ever works on. And then when you get them, you realize it's not as easy as it looks. When you see the tour players do it, believe me, those guys they work on all of those shots.
It reminds me very quickly, and then we'll wrap up with the last question, and we'll get into your books and that. I remember as a kid, my dad was not as generous as what you are, just punching it off the range. We had the range that he often took me to, had a tree line on the right-hand side, and it was close enough to the teeing area that I could go over there into the trees, and he would take about 4 or 5 balls, and he'd put them in different positions. And he'd say, okay, I want you to get it back out into the range. Pretend that's the fairway. And he'd literally, and it'd be straw, there'd be all kinds of hard dirt, whatever, roots and stuff. And he would certainly guide me through it, but he would always ask me, he'd say, what do you think you got to do here? Obviously, we're pretending the flag is out, this one out here. What do you got to do? Can you go for it? No. What can you do here? And he would do that, and he would put me in real life situations. And I'm not saying, and again, I'm not, everybody has that opportunity to be able to do that. So what you're suggesting is right on. But I'm just saying that's what he used to make me do, is to get out there and actually in real life situations. And sometimes later in the day on a golf course when it was quiet and, there was just the two of us sometimes, and we would do that. He would grab a ball and say, come on over here. And we'd go off to the side, and he would put me in those situations because he wanted me to feel what it was like, and he wanted me to basically use the old brain box to say, okay, what do you got to do here? He'd make me think about it. Like he said, you're not always going to have a perfect lie out in the middle of the fairway, so you've got to be able to figure out ways of recovering and do that. So he would do that with me periodically, not all the time, but periodically. And I remember at first I really hated it because I thought, God, I can't believe he's making me do this, but then it paid off over time. So you got to be able to do that for sure. Last one is, this is something that I think most people struggle with. Goes to what I was just talking about, that perfect lie. Most people, especially high handicap amateurs, struggle with the ball being either below or above their feet in very different situations. obviously we have to play to the slope. We have to understand that the slope is our friend if we set up properly. It goes to what you talked about earlier. Set up. Guide us through this real quick if you don't mind. And what do we do when the ball is below or above our feet? How do we handle that as opposed to just a run-of-the-mill in the middle of the fairway shot that's even?
Well, the first thing that you're going to do anytime the ball is above or below your feet is you're going to have to adjust your spine angle. So if the ball is above my feet, the ball is physically closer to my body. So I'm going to be more upright with my torso. And then I'm going to tend, with that lie, my ball is going to tend to hook. For a right-handed player, it's going to tend to go from right to left. Or if you're left-handed, it's going to hook the opposite way. So I will tend to do one of two things, depending on my lie. Like if I have a good lie and the ball's above my feet, I'll move the ball a little bit back in my stance, about one ball. If I have a bad lie and the ball's above my feet, I'll move the ball back even more. To it might be a little past the center of my stance. Because whenever the ball's above your feet in a bad lie situation in like heavy rough, the rough automatically is going to tend to catch the club face and turn it down to make it hook. And the lie is going to make it hook. So you need to make sure and move the ball back a little bit to keep it from hooking too much. And then I adjust my target. So I'm aiming to the right of the target. So sometimes I might be aiming 15, 20, 30 yards right of my target in anticipation of this hook when I hit the shot. The second, when the ball is below my feet, for me, that is a more difficult shot because you and I are tall. So I've got to bend over more. I've got to bend my knees more. And the one thing I do on any uneven lie is I make more practice swings than I would if I'm hitting on a par 3 where I've got a perfectly level lie. Because I'm trying to adjust the tilt of my body so that I can figure out where the ground is. Because the ground is going to always be different on every single shot in golf. So you want to figure that out. So that's a quick guide. And when the ball is below your feet, the ball is going to tend to go to the right. The ball is always going to want to go downhill. So if it's going to when it's below your feet to the right, when it's above your feet to the left.
Yeah, great points. All right, so as I mentioned at the top of the show, we were going to handle some questions here. Thank you for doing that. You did a great job as always. But I want to give you a few minutes to talk a little bit about your books. The first one, Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game. I got it right that time.
Yeah.
And then your second one, Fairways to Heaven, One Shot at a Time. And then, of course, you're hosting a podcast of the same name. Tell us about the first book. Why did you write the first book? And then what led you to the second book? And then talk a little bit about your podcast.
Well, the first book I wrote, I knew that God wanted me to write a book. And I knew this because when I became a teacher, when I was down in Orlando, I was at the Grand Cypress Academy of Golf, and I was standing up in front of students and presenting information. God started suddenly giving me stories from my life. I mean, this just kind of bombarded my mind, and I knew that he wanted me to write a book. I knew that he wanted me to write a Christian book, because I had a supernatural experience that happened to me when I was a teenager in high school, and I knew that I was supposed to do something with that. And so this went on, by the way, for about 20 years. I kept getting this information. I could be carrying on a conversation with a student, and I was being downloaded this information in my mind. And so in 2012, I started writing the book, and in 2016, it was published. And I had never written a book. I didn't know what I was doing. But God knew what he was doing, and he led me through that journey. And then that's really how I met you. I got on your podcast, and we started a great friendship through the years. And after the book was out and time was going on, and you purchased Golf Tips magazine, I asked you if you would be interested in allowing me to write a Christian golf feature called Fairways to Heaven. I just really felt like that would be a neat way in the book to bring Christianity and to bring golf to the readers. And you let me do that, in which was really kind of you to do. Mm-hmm. And you also wrote the foreword for the book, and I really appreciate that. You did a great job for that. And that book just was released last year. And so that's how the books came out. And then from that, I got contacted last October. One day I get a call from New York City, and they from Bold Brave TV, and they asked me. They said, we want you to host your own show, and I didn't. I was like, what do you mean you want me to host my own show? And I the whole time I was a little skeptical. Right. I even called you after I got off the phone, maybe a few days later, to talk about it. But they said, we're noticing that there's a lot of Christian downloads going on, and we really our advertisers want content. And they said, we put in the word, we put in Christianity, and they use AI research, and we put in golf. And he said, you came up, and you were the only one that came up. And when you came up, we started watching your videos. He said they listened to me on a couple of the interviews with you, and they said, we really feel like you could host your own show. And so I prayed about it. I thought about it, and I really took some time to think about this, because it's not just a mild commitment. It's 50. I signed a contract for 52 shows. I've done 8 shows now. And it's been really exciting. And you've been a guest on 2 of the shows, and we'll be on more. And I really feel like that God is leading me in this journey. And so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. And it's starting off as a great show. I know it's going to just continue to build momentum, and I'm glad. And thank you very much for, it's an honor to be on and talk about not just golf, but talk about our faith, and which we did a little bit more in the last one that I was on a few weeks ago. And, I think for me, what's been interesting about this journey, not just for myself, but, doing the show as you're finding out now with doing more of yours, is you really get to meet a lot of people. I met you through our conversations early on, and then I invited you on to Golf Talk Live on Coach's Corner, and you've been a guest as well over the years. And you get to meet a lot of people. And what was really interesting is we actually got to meet at the PGA show several years back face to face, and we talked in the program, and now of course we're here you are again on this show. But it's led to you to expand what it is you're doing, because and it's not to take away from the teaching aspect. I know that you love teaching, that's a passion of yours, but you've obviously felt led to do other things and expand that, and to do more than just the teaching aspect. And you've come out and you've done 2 great books, and I was very grateful and honored to be asked to do a forward in your latest book. And I'm sure you might have one more book in you. I don't know. We'll see about that. And I'm always happy to help you promote it or to be a part of it in some way. But I just think it's important. The main reason I did my shows originally was, there really wasn't anybody doing this type of format for golf anyways. And I just looked at all the conversations going on online and social media about golf, and I thought, boy, wouldn't it be great to do something like that? And I brought it onto the airwaves. You've done something similar, with your podcast. It's not just talking about golf and interviewing some great people, but to sort of marry your spiritual beliefs together with something that you're passionate about, of course, is golf. So again, the birth of Fairways to Heaven. So glad to be a part of it, and let the folks know, where can they go if they want to get the books? How can they go about doing that? And if they want to tune into the podcast, how do they go about doing that as well?
Well, if you want to read the books, you can go. There's a lot of different ways, but you can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart websites. If you want an autographed copy, you can go to my website, deckergolf.com, and all my contact information is there. I can send you an autographed copy, but you can order them online. They also have an audio book for the first book, Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game, has an audio book. And then my second book, Fairways to Heaven, has an audio book that will be coming out hopefully very soon. I'm in the final stages of reviewing it. The book is complete. I've got to review it, though, and that's going to take me a couple more weeks to do. And then I'm hoping that by this summer, that will be out as well. And then if you want to watch the show, there's a lot of different ways. My show airs live on Bold Brave TV on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to watch it live, you can watch it on Bold Brave TV. You can watch it through Facebook, on my Facebook page. You can also watch it through YouTube Live, or you can watch it on LinkedIn Live. Now, most people can't watch a live show at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, so you can always go and download it afterward, and you can go to my YouTube, you can go to LinkedIn or Facebook on any of my platforms that I'm on. You can go and watch it there. Or you can go to my website, again, deckergolf.com, and I post it. Every one of my episodes are on the website. So if you go to my website, you can pull it off there. It's a YouTube link that you can watch it right there. And so it's great to download. Also, Spreaker, Spotify, getting a lot of downloads. I'm really impressed how that's working because I can track the numbers.
Yep.
And a lot of Spotify and Spreaker, there's a ton of downloads coming through those platforms.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's the beauty of social media and all of that is, getting the message out and that. And I think it's great to have something different. This was one of the things, as you mentioned earlier on about, sort of your pitch about doing Fairways to Heaven with the magazine, at that particular time this was something different that really wasn't out in the golfing world. And, like anything, it's new, it's different, and there's always certain risks and elements, but it worked out to be something very good and happy to continue with that relationship as well. But Jon, as always, thank you very much. And if they want to go to your website, it's deckergolf.com. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And all of your contact information, all of the landing points, if you will, that he talked about, you can access through the website. So go to deckergolf.com. And if you want to see him throughout the season on my program, Golf Talk Live, he'll be on Coach's Corner. Usually, I believe it's usually the second, or it's varied, but it varies. Usually about I think maybe the third Thursday is typically, but just keep staying in tune and you'll be able to see Jon here on the Coach's Corner panel. But my friend, have a very happy Easter. God bless and continue the great work. And I will see you real soon back here on the Coach's Corner panel on Golf Talk Live. Hang tight. I'm going to take a commercial break. And when I come back, I'm going to be joined by my very special guest of the evening, Mark Mattingly, the Executive Vice President of Landscape Golf Management. We will be right back.
Improve your putting with the Alignment Ball Marker, a revolutionary new in-game putting alignment tool and ball marker. Its patented design allows you to read your putt and adjust your alignment at the same time by using your putter, which improves your accuracy and makes the process of putting faster. 100% legal according to the USGA, by their definition, permitted under the rules of golf. Winner of Best New Product at the PGA Show and only $9.99 on Amazon. And it's also completely customizable for any golf event or as a promotional giveaway. Order at alignmentballmark.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And I'm super excited to have tonight's featured guest, Mark Mattingly. He is the Executive Vice President of Landscapes Golf Management. Let me tell you just a little bit about him, and then we'll get into tonight's discussion. He's a 30-year golf industry executive, and as I mentioned, he's the Executive Vice President of Landscapes Golf Management, and they're an operator of more than 60 golf courses, country clubs, and destination clubs across America. His primary role is helping owners of golf properties formulate strategies towards achieving their desired objectives. In addition to overseeing business development, Mark also manages special projects and contributes to the overall strategic direction of Landscapes Golf Management. He's also a Class A PGA professional, and was a longtime board member of the Indiana PGA and member of the Club Management Association of America. So, Mark, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I appreciate it. Thank you. So let's talk about the tournament. Before we get into what we're going to talk about, I want to get your thoughts on the Masters that just happened last week. Did your pick come to fruition, or did you have somebody else in mind?
Pick, and then there's the practical pick. So I had the pleasure to actually be down there with some guests and be there as the final putts were made. And my guest chose to be indoors in the air conditioning, and we cheered along with the balance of the restaurant. And I don't think there was anybody in there that wasn't rooting for Rory when it really came down to it. I have to say, my office pool, I had Bryson because I was afraid that Rory's mind would get the better of his body, because he's got all the talent in the world, and it was just great to see him, break through and get it done. So
yeah, it was for a while there. I mean, Bryson obviously took the lead for a little while, and then a number 11, of course, he had that mishap there, hitting it into the water. And I was talking with somebody else earlier in the program about that. And that was really sort of the change for him. I mean, he had some other issues that happened along the way, but that was really a defining moment, I think, was when he hit that shot into the water. And unfortunately, yours went in the water with it. And but you know what, Rory was a good choice as well, and I'm happy for him. And you know, he works so hard. I mean, all these guys do, but he works so hard. And you know, I think back to 2011 when he tried to get it done back then, and it didn't happen. And he's, you know, obviously had many other events since then, and you know that this really meant a lot to him. And there was a few moments on 13 there. You know, there was a few, you know, ahs in the gallery thinking, "Uh-oh, here we go." You know, this is going to be, you know, real exciting finish. And obviously, you know, Justin Rose was warming up in the bullpen, as they say, and but Rory got it done in hole one in the playoff. But yeah, it was an exciting. You know what? It was an exciting Masters. I've watched the last several Masters, and they're all pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but this was especially exciting because I was rooting for Rory. I like Bryson. Don't get me wrong, but I was rooting for Rory, and I was glad to see he got it done.
It just shows his humanity. How many times have we laid up when we have a lead, thinking, you know, what I need to do here is just play the hole safe, only to end up with a tragic result like he did? I mean, it was just so much. I could just live vicariously through him, thinking, God, how many times have I done that to myself? And he could have easily gotten home in 2 and at least put it in a bunker, and at worst made a 6 and probably a 5. Maybe he doesn't make birdie, and yet we know what happened when he laid up. So anyway, just shows his humanity.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, he just you know, he's such a you know, I think for this generation of golfers, up and comers, and that you see out there, he really, in my mind, is a great steward of the game. Not just for getting all of his talent and stuff, but he's just a kind of a very humble person. I obviously have never met him personally, but just from everybody that I've talked to that knows him, and obviously when you watch him on TV, he just has an air about him, and there just doesn't seem to be you know, any arrogance about him. It's just like, I know what I got to do. I got to get it done. And I just am appreciative of everything I have in my life. And I'm just going to, you know, come out here. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, he's looking around and just taking it all in. And, you know, he's been there dozens of times before. It's not his first Masters, but it's like it's the first one each time he goes there. So he just sort of has that aura about him. And I think that's why people really resonate with his personality. They just see that he's kind of a down to earth guy, even though he's, you know, worth a lot and has a lot going for him and gets to, you know, play golf for a living, but he's just a humble guy. So, but all right, so let's talk about landscapes. I'm going to call it LGM for short, because I don't know if I keep saying I will throw it out there every once in a while. I want people to know what I'm talking about. So, landscapes golf management is what I'm talking about. We're going to call it LGM for short for a little bit. Talk about the origin. Well, first off, talk about you. Talk about how you got interested in golf. Obviously, you're a PGA professional, and so obviously you like the teaching and obviously enjoy playing as well. But so what got you into golf first off, and then let's talk about the origins of LGM.
Well, I went to college and got a business management degree and played on a small college golf team. And that really started me down the path of golf. And as I got toward my senior year, there was a number of us classmates really talking about what we were going to do after we graduated. And that's really where I became familiar with the opportunity to pursue being a PGA member and to become an apprentice underneath the Class A member, which is really what I ended up doing after graduation. So I went down that traditional path of assistant pro for about 4.5 seasons, and then got my first head professional job. And after holding that position for another 2.5 years, I got introduced to corporate golf management for the first time in 1998. And I attended a seminar learning a little bit more about what being a general manager might mean versus being a head golf professional, and coming to understand the agronomic side of those responsibilities, food and beverage, accounting and finance, human resources, and just was really interested in more of a holistic approach to managing a property and not just a departmental approach. And that appealed to me. And so I got involved with another group at that time, one that you'd be familiar with if I said, but worked with them for a number of years. And that has just appealed to me ever since. So that was more than 25 years ago. More recently in the story, I joined Landscapes Golf Management 13 years ago in 2012. when they were looking for a regional operations manager. And that fit my background. I had come up through the ranks and run everything from municipal properties to privately owned daily fee, upscale daily fee, resort and private clubs as well. And they were looking for a regional manager that had experience in each one of those and could really act as a client liaison and a mentor to individual general managers at a small portfolio of properties. So that started about 8 properties at that point in time. And so held that role for a little over 2 years, about 2.5 years. And our business development person who had been leading the company up to that point, and we had modest growth at that point in time in 2012. He moved on to another position, and we left that seat open for a period of time and thought perhaps we would just handle that internally on kind of platoon basis, and
Right.
didn't
Right.
have a lot of success in growth. And I did have in my background, part of the story, I left out some sales experience. And so our president, Tom Everett, looked to me and said, well, you've been with us now for a while. You know our people, our systems, our processes, our approach, and you're comfortable speaking in front of an audience of people. Would you like to try this? And that was an experiment we began about 10 years ago. And I guess it's gone pretty well so far. But I've held that responsibility ever since. And as my title grew from vice president to executive vice president, we've layered on some other additional expanded duties that I have relative to the development of the company as a whole. However, day in and day out, I serve in this capacity and share with owners and operators and boards and city administrators the value of the management company relationship. And that's really what I do today, day in and day out.
It's interesting, just to go back for a second, you talked about some of the things that you've done as a golf professional, and I don't think people really realize just how many different hats there are in our profession. I mean, obviously most people are familiar with tour players, of course, as golf professionals. Many people are, familiar with the teaching side of golf and obviously a certain amount of golf management, but they don't really realize that there's a lot of other things in this business as a PGA professional that you can do. And, you've obviously, dipped your toe in many different, waters, if you will, throughout your career. And obviously you have settled now at this point in something that you really enjoy and want to foster and continue to help grow. But, a lot of people that, for the average folks out there, don't really realize what it is that golf professionals and the opportunities that they have. And you've had obviously some great opportunities to be able to expand on that. I want to get you to talk about some of the, I guess, the proliferation, if you will, of retaining multi-course operators like your company. What's the reason behind that? Why does it matter? What's important? Because again, the average person out there that obviously people tuning into the show, many of them are going to understand that are in the profession, but those are not. What is it exactly that you guys do? Talk about specifically what you're doing and how you're helping a lot of these golf courses.
I think it's just safe to say that the industry just continues to get layered and more complex. And I think that is a great thing from a consumer perspective, that we're delivering more and more value and experience-based programming for our customers. But when it comes down to, well, who has to own that back at the property, you really are spreading a single individual very thinly. And I'll just touch on just some of the responsibilities of a typical general manager, but would be anything from guiding their individual department managers, holding them accountable, mentoring them, providing them goals, getting them together so that they can have a common vision and execute on behalf of the membership or the guests. There's always going to be that piece, but they act really as the head of human resources. They are the chief financial officer. They are the liaison to the owner, whether that be a board or a park district or whether that be individual owners. They've got to really understand the business in total and be able to communicate that. Certainly on a monthly basis and sometimes, weekly and daily from time to time. They are the chief problem solver and strategist on property. They have to have very strong skills in food and beverage and hospitality. They have to understand agronomics at least well enough to be able to take a tour of the golf course and take feedback from the superintendent, talk strategically about what we can afford to do at this point in time, where we need to be spending our resources, how we're going to replace our equipment fleet over time, what are our considerations below ground, whether that be irrigation systems, whether that be infrastructure like cart paths or bunkers, and understand enough to be able to ask wise questions and take good feedback from your superintendent. And then again, communicate back to the membership and to the owners They have to understand golf operations, and they don't all come through the PGA track like I did. So some are coming from the food and beverage side, but need to understand the golf operations side. And once you start layering in pools and paddle sports and sometimes lodging and on, the duties are very sizable. And we're playing with, not playing, I guess we're managing on behalf of our owners. Sometimes their life's work has gone into this. They put significant funds behind this, and there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot of reward as well. But one individual being responsible for that without a team behind them is kind of a tough spot to be in. And so that's really what a management company is built to do. And so we have specialists in each area, each one of those disciplines that I mentioned, accounting and finance, legal, human resources, food and beverage, agronomy, golf operations, programming, marketing, sales, technology. Those are some I didn't mention yet. We're also looking for our GM to understand those pieces. We have support personnel that are experts in each one of those that can support that individual general manager or any other department manager that they want to come alongside. And so that's really the advantage of a management company, is a team approach to problem solving, to business planning, to long-range planning, capital planning for the facility, that it's not all on the shoulders of one single individual. And I think that's the attractiveness for a lot of our owners and operators, not to mention some side benefits that we bring to the table that are valuable, such as national purchasing power, the ability to bring economies of scale to them, and significant savings when we're purchasing for 60, almost 70 properties now versus a single shop. That's a real cost savings on an annualized basis. We're also able to bring alliances from a personnel standpoint within our network, as people within our network of clubs kind of rise to the ability to manage and take on the next challenge. We're able to move them in and out of different properties when there's needs for that. So that helps our team grow, but also helps our client properties fill those holes as people move on to take other jobs or other experiences and leave us. So all of those things are important. And not to mention, I guess, lastly, is just the ability to play multiple properties. You know, when you're a member at one of our facilities, you have access to all. So,
yeah. And you know, one thing I just want to add real quick too, what people have to also understand, what you bring to the table, besides the many things that you just discussed, is you're able to offer to the owner management. When I say management, not your management, but their management, if you will, is an objective viewpoint as well, which is extremely important, because you're able to look at things from a distance, and you're able to say, okay, we see trends here, we see patterns here going on. Here's some of the recommendations. Here's what you need to focus on more, or you're not focusing enough on. Because sometimes when you're, you know, as a business owner myself, when you're in the trenches, you sometimes don't always see the forest for the trees, and you need an outside, you know, expertise to be able to look at it objectively and say, you know what, hey, Ted, love what you're doing here, but we're seeing some things here that we think could be better, and here's what we're going to recommend. Ultimately, the decision may end up being mine, but again, having that objective viewpoint from you know, a set of experts like that in various different fields is extremely valuable as a business owner, to have that team available. So yeah, you're bringing a lot to the table, and but again, you're bringing an outside perspective, which sometimes is needed, especially in this day. And this brings me to the next point that I want to get your sort of point of view about this, because when we look at how things were run in the past, how, you know, the present, and where you see the future of managing, you know, especially profitable golf businesses, there's been a lot of changes in our industry. You see what the trends were in the past. Some people are sort of stuck in the past. They're not really in the present, and they're not always thinking about the future. They think they're, you know, change isn't necessary. Let's stick with the status quo. But you've seen the past, you're seeing where things are now, and you're looking forward to the future. Give us your thoughts. Where do you see the trends going? Where have they come from? And where are they right now? I know it's a lot to digest, but
that's a big question. No, that's fine. So just, you know, looking back, maybe just pre-COVID, and it's hard not to, you know, use that as a sort of a line of demarcation, because things shifted significantly pre and post COVID. But prior to that, in the run up from roughly the early 2000s to 2019, we just saw a steady decline in rounds played. It was really becoming very concerning. And a lot of what we were doing during that period of time with clients was helping them just hang on, you know, develop strategies to be wise stewards of the limited resources they had, and drive additional ancillary revenue wherever we could. There was limited rounds. The market was cut too thinly. And so the game was really, can we hang on? And I guess to some extent that worked. The industry lost about 1,200 properties during that period of time. So trying to help those hang on that could was really the prudent thing to do, but it didn't seem sustainable long term. And we needed some sort of a shift, and COVID just happened to be that. But prior to that, we were coming up with unique programming that would include anything from field days for the kids and bounce houses to yoga classes, cooking classes, fishing classes, 5 and 10K runs in the off season, comedy nights, movie nights, just anything to get folks to the property. So they weren't purely seeing us as a golf course. They were seeing us somewhere they could bring their family, and hopefully we could get the reward of a little bit of a fee for the activity and some food and beverage and some goodwill and maybe some extra visits. And that was just crucial in helping our customers really survive that period of time in our industry. And the impact on assets was that many of those properties, even if we could keep them cash flow positive, it was minimal. It was enough to service principal and interest if they did have a loan, but there just wasn't much capital left over. There wasn't enough free cash to really develop their infrastructure and keep up with the age of their infrastructure. And so there was a big lag or deferred capital issue building as we reached 2020. And so if I shift past 2020, and I think we all know what happened there, and golf really became a safe game that folks could play when they were otherwise stuck indoors much of the time. And that led to getting a lot of people that were latent demand, that were interested in golf, but only casually, perhaps at a Topgolf type of a venue or a Pop Stroke or something of that nature, where they hadn't really made it to what we would call a green grass location, where you may have 9 holes or 18 full holes to play. They hadn't made that jump yet. Those folks knew enough about golf and began to see golf as safe. And they said, well, maybe that's what I'm going to do. Maybe that's the thing that I'm going to entertain myself with during this difficult time in 2020 and 2021. And so we saw some folks shift from latent demand into new players. And so over the last 5 years, we've seen about 10% growth over the prior 5 years prior to COVID. And so that has really infused a lot of confidence into the industry, a lot of new capital into the industry for new development, and it's made all of our properties healthier. So immediately, what happened in the first couple of years post-COVID was we had owners saying, okay, that was 2 good years of cash flow, and I have a lot of deferred maintenance and deferred equipment needs. What do I do first? And what could I do in a phased approach that if I fix this now, I might get more activity from my client base or my membership base in that location driving revenue. I can reinvest that revenue in years 3, 4, and 5. And so helping, again, when we talk about what does a management company do, helping walk a client through that strategic approach where, I'm not sitting on millions, but I've now harvested several $100,000 over the last couple of years. How can I best use this and parlay that into other opportunities in the years to follow? And so that's really what we've been doing since that time with existing clients, is help them navigate that. And many of them have caught up on years of ignored and deferred maintenance issues and equipment needs. And so it's nice to have them healthy again. Nobody knows the future for sure, but most of the industry experts don't see this slowing down. There's just no signs yet of that. It seems sustainable. And I think I would attribute that to something I mentioned before, is a lot of the efforts that we are making, the extraordinary efforts to create unique programming, to keep people engaged. We had all that in place in our playbook. So when customers came, even from outside of green grass properties, we had a lot of fun activities to keep them engaged beyond just playing the course, which still in some cases is intimidating for them. And we're playing at off-peak times, and they're taking some clinics and they're learning as they go, but they can keep coming back to the facility, and we get to know their names and their likes and the things that they like to do, and get them plugged into a community of people that aren't always playing competitive 18-hole rounds of golf. They're doing a lot of other things and activities that we have for them at the club. And so I think that's a bit of a testament to the resourcefulness prior to COVID, set us up to be able to keep these players engaged post-COVID and keep things going, keep it building.
Yeah, and some great points. And I think also too, Mark, is when you look at sort of the new demographic of players coming out there, most of them, if they didn't grow up in a golf family, didn't really understand much about golf, their really only exposure was what they saw on TV, something like they heard about the Masters or the U.S. Open. They had very little, if any, exposure. So to them, golf was, well, that's out of reach for me. I'm not an LPGA or a PGA Pro. There's nothing in it for me. And it was really smart for a lot of properties to diversify and offer other programs like you talked about to get them out there when, green fees were maybe down a little bit, and get them engaged and say, hey, you know what? I like this property here. There's a lot of things to do. Hey, while I'm here, I'm going to try out this golf. I'm going to take a look at golf. Maybe I need to take a second look at it. There is something for me. So it really opened a door. And, and we're going to talk about this here now and I want to get your thoughts on this. When it comes to the modern day golfer, and the other thing, one last thing before I do that, I want to mention the other thing that as tragic as was that COVID did, in addition to opening up a new crop of golfers, it brought a lot of golfers that slid away from the game for a few years. Maybe they were older and they thought, you know what, I'm kind of past, my enthusiasm for golf. I'm a little older and I'm just going to enjoy life. And then all of a sudden there's like nothing to do, and thought, well, okay, maybe I'll give it another try. And now they've sort of been bitten by that bug again. So you get a lot of the more senior golfers coming back out as well. But the modern day golfer, and you touched on a lot of things, their experience was entirely different because many of them didn't grow up in golf. They didn't play on golf teams like you did, and didn't have maybe family members, a younger generation of family that didn't play golf, knew nothing about it. So you introduced them to other things to get them out there. But what is, I guess, the desire? What are they looking for? What is some of the feedback that your people are getting, not just at LGM, but also from your groups that you're working with, properties that you're working with? What's been some of the feedback about what experience they're looking for off the golf course, both off and I guess on the golf course?
I think there's several things. I think from maybe from just a technology standpoint, the ease of booking a tee time and feeling comfortable, whether or not I want to talk to a human, and that's just the nature of things, right? I want to have access from my phone. I don't necessarily want to have a conversation. Right. But I want to be able to feel confident that I can navigate your website, whether it be on a mobile device or whether it be from a laptop, and book a tee time and know when I'm supposed to be there. And so they're certainly looking from a technology standpoint. And we're even adapting programs to move them in and out of the golf shop more quickly, just from a check-in standpoint too. And checking in advance is one of those. So some of it is technology. Some of it is just creating an environment in which they can easily navigate the property as soon as they drive in the parking lot. Whether that be signage, whether that be people welcoming them as they come in. Those are sometimes soft skills or basic skills that you would expect to be in place. And yet the last time we had a boom in the 90s, we didn't necessarily treat new faces that way. And so I think what you see is those of us that are a little bit longer in the tooth now in my career, I remember that, right? Exactly. I remember sort of what the impression was, and we just made the golf courses longer and harder, and we didn't really welcome new players. They were in the way. And, you almost kind of shame them into the rules. And don't you know how to dress? And don't you know where to stand? And don't you understand etiquette? And, why are you out here if you don't? And there was a little bit of that air. And we've tried to put all of that away as best we can. And yes, there is a way to handle oneself at a golf course, but there's also a polite way in which to teach that over time. And you're right, a lot of these folks didn't come up through a caddy program where they would intuitively know that, or play junior golf where they would intuitively know that. And so we need to come at them with a little softer approach and give them a chance to have some success and feel welcome. And I think that translates to the golf course too, is that we need to have a lot of beginner programs that can bring people from, as I said, a top golf experience where it really is a gamified experience. My score doesn't matter. I moved the ball forward. It went into a hole of some color and some lights went off, right? I got to get them from that to some similar experience where I can have some success and some positive endorphins for success on the putting green, or maybe on the driving range. Maybe we have some technology on the driving range in some cases to mimic what they learned early on or what they were familiar with in a top golf venue. But whatever we can afford to do at our properties, we need to give them an on-ramp. And I've often thought we weren't paying much attention to perhaps the ski industry, because I think they do that as well as any. You can go to a resort anywhere in the country and have no idea how to ski, and they have a program for you to
Yep.
plug you in, and they have ways for you to experience success until you're ready. And even once you're on the big mountain, now I have greens and blues and black diamonds and double black diamonds and bowls, and I have my way to progress through
Yep.
as I gain skills and gain confidence. And I think we were the first time around. Last time we had a boom 30 years ago, we built a lot of double black diamonds and said good luck,
Yeah.
and let people fall down the mountainside, right? And so I think we've learned from that, and I think we've gotten wiser, and I think that's why people feel more welcomed when they come to the properties, and I think that's a big plus.
Yeah, well said. And I think just going back to, talking about the past, I think one of the other issues that, many golf courses struggled with was this sort of, I'm going to come up the driveway in the morning, open the doors to the golf course and, let people come, because they had that flow of traffic coming in. People were coming, whether they were members or, semi-private, whatever the case was. But then there came a point in time when that slump, if you will, came in where that wasn't happening. You couldn't. So are you seeing now more properties realizing through, whether it's through the assistance of technology, social media, whatnot, instead of just going and opening their doors in the morning, they're actually reaching out in their communities and finding ways of drawing people in. So they're actually engaging more with the public through, effective campaigns, in other words, they're not just going and opening the doors in the morning, they're finding ways of integrating themselves into a community atmosphere. And again, obviously in some cases on a global scale, but for some of your larger properties, resorts and things like that. But are you seeing that as becoming more and more of a trend as well?
Absolutely. I touched on it a little bit by having clinics, but I guess you could look at that as more of a passive approach, that we're going to have those whether people show up or not. But I think going into schools and interacting with kids that way, and providing free lessons and building a program and a junior program that way. I think the PGA has done some great things with their PGA Junior League to foster activities like that for young people, to get them playing the game as well. I know our superintendents are beginning to go into schools as well with their STEM-based program, because one of the other things that happened really pre-COVID, it started, and now we're really seeing the impact of it. A lot of our assistant superintendents have left the industry. And a lot of our superintendents are getting up in age, and we don't have really good bench strength there. So even to kind of switch for a moment and just say that's another way that we're trying to rebuild the infrastructure of our industry to be able to take care of customers long term. And some of it's just recruiting people back into the industry that left. And to some extent, that's true on the assistant golf professional side too. We don't have the bench strength we once had in the PGA side of the organization either. So it's not only just creating programs, I think, for the customers, but making sure the next generation of service providers, hospitality providers, and technicians and specialists and artists, which really are our chefs, our food and beverage people, and our agronomists, are all artists in their own right, making sure that we've got the depth there to carry this thing on for decades to come.
I've had the pleasure, this is my 13th season doing this show, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of different folks of different, genres, different age groups and whatnot. And one of the things that when I'm talking to some of the younger folks out there, one of the things that they have said to me that are newer to the golf business, newer than you and I are, have said one of the things that they want to experience is they want to have fun. They understand the importance of, getting down and, like they did in the Masters, they've got to focus on, making the putts and hitting the shots that need to be hit. They get all that. But at the same time, even some of the tour players, like I interview a lot of the young ladies coming up on the Epson Tour as an example on another program I do. And they've all said the same thing, that there's times when they get so hyper-focused on the game that they forget to actually just go out there and have some fun. And I think that's something as well that this younger generation is really bringing. And the reason why I bring this up is we want to get into talk about technology a little bit, is the onslaught of Bluetooth speakers on the golf course. I mean, I've gone on something you never heard 20, 30 years ago. And my father, or actually older than that, but took me out in the golf course. You didn't hear some tunes blaring out in the golf course. Now you're hearing it out in the golf course. And yeah, I can understand it can be a little disruptive, but these kids want to have fun. If they're going to be engaged, again, going back to the technology, everything from booking online, doing all these things. But when they're out in the golf course, there's a time to be serious. but there's also a time to just kick back and I'm with my buddies and we want to just have some fun, maybe throw a little money on the holes or whatever's the case. Is that something as well that you're trying to work through with your company, with your properties, and saying, we need to make sure that not only are we building revenues up and things like that, but the people are having a great experience, not just playing golf, but actually a great experience at your facility all the way around. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think, we've really had, you mentioned music, but we've had music playing outside of our clubhouses and our driving ranges for years. And, you have to be sensitive to your neighbors, but within reason, being able to create that environment where people can just relax, and music is a great way to do that as they're playing. And it's not just the young kids. I played in a two-man golf league last night, and the two gentlemen that we were paired with, one of them was 45 years old, very well put together, very technically precise. He walked, but on his little carrot cart here, he had music playing the whole time. And so it's really for everybody. And whether they bring it in themselves as a speaker or whether we provide it for them as speakers in the golf course, I think that is right on point. But from an entertainment standpoint, I mean, obviously we have televisions and tournaments playing throughout the clubhouse whenever possible. Almost all of our private clubs now have at least one interior simulator bay, some of them as many as 3 or 4. So if we do have a bad weather day, or if folks want to get to the golf course before and after to play in simulator golf, or they want to get fit for a set of clubs, we've got that there for them. If they want to bring their kids out for a fun night, and it doesn't have to just be golf. There's a lot of different games. There's soccer games. There's you can shoot deer and different things, different settings that you can set it up and let kids have fun with it. It's beyond just hitting the golf ball. But those are just a few things, I guess, I came to my mind as you were talking about that we've tried to accommodate. So it's not always just traditional golf.
Yeah. And I know, like, for instance, I work with a lot of LPGA professionals, not just players, but obviously pros that teach the game. And, something that's been very popular for years is, I know you're going to be familiar with this, wine and nine, concept where, and then get a little rowdy after a while, but again, making it fun and again, incorporating, let's get out and have some fun in golf. Because one of the things that, talking with a lot of female golfers is there's really a couple of areas of intimidation for them. Is one is they don't want to look bad out in the golf where nobody really does. But guys, we can laugh it off. We can joke it off with our buddies if we hit a bad shot. But for the ladies, they're a little bit more self-conscious about that. But also, the point that you raised earlier is when they come up there, if they're not sure what to do, what's the protocol? Where do I go? I don't even know where to drop my bag off, that sort of thing. So they want to have a pleasurable experience and they want to feel like they're welcomed. And I think the best way to do that is by having some of the things that you talked about earlier, is being able to have, whether it's like a wine and nine or some other, environment where you're kind of, in some cases, and you talked about entertainment. I mean, a lot of courses now are having local talent come up and in the evening having short, small concerts, even like where they might have one guy playing the guitar, but he's doing, around the campfire type thing. I'm sure you've had a lot of your clients are doing similar things as well. So it's not just about the golf anymore, is it? It's really about the experience when they're coming out to that facility.
Absolutely. A chance to build some memories with friends or with family or with coworkers. And you're right. It's not, there is still competitive golf, but it's really not about going and shooting a score anymore. It's really about coming out and having a holistic experience. And food and beverage is a huge piece of that.
Oh, yeah.
By the way. And that's become so much more important with the more recent generations. And, they have more sophisticated palates, I think, than I did at their age. And they have expectations that come along with that. And that's everything from wines, but craft beers and healthy selections on the menu, and not sort of the dark corner restaurant deep inside the clubhouse, right? With the dim lighting. They're looking for opportunities to eat outdoors, if at all possible, eat near a body of water like the pool, if they can, if at all possible. And so that's a big part of their experience as well. I don't think you can lose sight of that from a food and beverage perspective. But one of the other things, I think, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in and say, one of the other expectations are just something less than even 9 holes to play. And we've seen a lot of additions to private country clubs and public facilities as well that can be as few as 3 to 5 holes. Occasionally be 9, but it can be 7, it can be 12. But putting in a short course where we're hitting shots that might be 80 to 120 yards, and it's just a loop that you can do in 45 minutes. You can walk it with 2 or 3 clubs. You can have a cocktail in one hand. You can still play games and challenge each other, but it's something more than just a putting contest. I think those of us that go back a ways used to have putting contests with our buddies on the putting green, but this is bigger than that, but it has that same spirit. And just another opportunity to get the family out there and have some success, whether they're at the beginning of life or the end of life, quite frankly. And they're just don't have the energy or strength perhaps to play 9 holes, but they could play a short course where the total yardage might be 1,000 yards, right? And we just got 10 holes that are 100 yards each, give or take. And we're seeing the expectation that we're thinking ahead and providing that wherever the land will allow us to do so.
Well, what you're seeing, I think now, just to expand a little bit more on that, is I think what you're seeing now, in the past, the golf course sort of dictated the market. This is what we've got, this is what we're doing, and the market, was developed that way. Now the market is actually dictating to the golf course, saying, this is what we want. So to your point, bringing these short courses in, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, what have you, with a variety, and most of them are feeding right off of the clubhouse so they can get a drink, like you said, take it out with them. And you're seeing more and more golf course. And it really boils down to this, is it's not even just about playing a longer hole. It's a timing issue. A lot of people only have an hour, and they want to be able to have that experience. It's the same thing with teaching. People used to come out for an hour-long lesson. Well, they're not doing that anymore. They're coming out for maybe 30 minutes, or they're doing it online instruction or something to that event, because they're busy with other activities in their life. So it's not that golf is not a priority. It's fitting in a different slot in their lifestyle. So for the really die-hard golfers that want to get out there and play, there's something for them. For those that just want to dip their toes in a little bit, there's something for them. So it's a much more diverse pot, if you will, than what it was, 30 or so years ago. What do you see the future for LGM? What do you see moving forward? How is that going to change from what you see? But before you answer that, what surprises you most about what you do? When you wake up in the morning, has there been times where you thought, wow, now I'm surprised about my job? What is it about your job that surprised you the most?
Oh, what surprises me the most? I guess I would say that the obstacles that I faced 10 years ago remain there today. I'm probably better equipped to overcome those, but the fears remain. And I think from an industry standpoint, the management companies that are out there, of course, I'm biased. I think we're one of the best out there, but there's a lot of good ones. And there are some stories floating around out there that are from decades ago. Problems that, yes, they happened, but that's not today's modern management company. And so I'm sometimes surprised that those stories are out there, because I know the origins of those. I mean, they go way, way back. And so overcoming some of the same challenges, but that's my job. My job is to walk through the anxiety that people feel when they consider bringing on a management company for the first time. I'm incredibly rewarded by the work that our team does. So from a surprise standpoint, I'm not surprised they're capable of it. Perhaps I'm surprised how consistently they deliver on that, because I'm out there making the promise, right? I'm the tip of the spear in terms of I'm sharing with a customer that we can solve this issue that you have, and we have the right people in place. And yet I have to go on down the road and believe that behind me are the people that are going to honor that promise. And yet they do that day in and day out. And it makes my job a real pleasure. So I don't know if that's as much a surprise as it is a privilege, but it is fun to get up in the morning and know that you're telling a true story and you can make a difference, and there's people behind you that'll have your back and make it happen.
Sounds good. And what about the future of Landscapes Golf Management? What's going to happen down the road? Where do you see it developing, and where do you see, obviously, continued growth, I'm sure, is going to happen, but do you see even more changes from what you're currently doing now on how your model is? Do you see it developing into or morphing into something different or more expansive? Where do you see it going?
Do you think will continue to grow. Now we've been strategic about that. We are adding some team members to my business development team. We don't have to get any bigger than we are, but we think we've got a good story to tell. We think we've got a good product to deliver to customers, and there's plenty of need out there, and people are getting more and more comfortable with the idea of hiring a management company, and we want to be prepared to scale as those opportunities present themselves. So yes, we're going to continue to grow, but we're a family-owned company. We're not traded on the stock market. We don't have any investors that we're beholden to. So we grow at the pace that we think is reasonable. We're not going to get out over our skis. We want to make sure that we can keep those promises every single time. But I can tell you that we're not done yet, and we have no intention of shrinking or going away. But we're not trying to catch anybody either. It's a really nice spot to be in. But we're sitting at roughly 70 properties now. I would anticipate over the course of the next 5 years we'll top 100. But there's no rush to get there. We're going to get there at the right pace, and again, make sure that we can bring all of our customers along and help them grow their businesses steadily along the way.
I have no doubt. I think you guys have a great business model, and just from listening to you here, obviously, and I'm sure your team members would concur. You have obviously a great attitude about what you do and an excitement about what you do, and that's you obviously love. It's very evident that you love what you do, and I think when you are in that position, it's very enviable for other people to look on the outside and say, "Wow, I wish I would do what he's doing." He seemed, he's got all the enthusiasm and excitement. And it's not just hyperbole. It's not just double speak. It's genuine enthusiasm about what you do and what you're bringing, and the excitement level that you're bringing to your customers. And that's when it's not really a job.
Right.
It's
right. And if I could share one other thing, and I know we're probably coming to the top of the hour, but I would just share that one of the things that's exciting about being part of a company like this is we have a sister company, Landscapes Unlimited, which is really the nation's leader in golf course construction, renovation, and irrigation. And prior to COVID, they were really working with maybe the top 20% of the market that were sort of insulated from the economy. And so if they wanted to do a renovation project, they could do it regardless of what was going on. And we were working with clubs that were struggling to get by, as I mentioned earlier. Now, because golf has surged the way it has and there is confidence again, those gaps are narrowing, and we're being able to work together on projects for the first time in a long time, and really birth a project from the architect's drawings to the first turn of the shovel, all the way through to opening day and well into the future. And it's an exciting time, not only to do what we do, but be able to partner with our sister company and bring something all the way through to fruition from just an idea. So it's again, very exciting time for us.
Yeah, I have no doubts on that. So if people wanted to get more information, is there a website? And this goes for everybody, not just people that just want to investigate LGM. Where can they go to get more information? And obviously, I'm sure your contact information will be there if they want to reach out to you personally. But where can they go?
Very simple. Landscapes, plural, landscapesgolf.com. And that'll give you just an introduction to our company, some additional pieces that I wasn't able to share tonight, but my contact information is there. You can drill down into the different levels of expertise that I touched on and just see who the people are that own those within the company, put faces and names with those various departments and see if there's a need. And I would just say we're a company that from the very beginning decided we don't have to offer a turnkey solution. We're capable of it. We do that for the majority of our clients, but we can also work on a independent select basis. And if you just have a need in a particular department, whether that's agronomics, food and beverage, or any of the things I mentioned, we can deploy just in that particular area. And you'll see that demonstrated on our website as well.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and sharing with the audience what it is that you do, and obviously, as I said, very passionately. I'm going to get you to hang on for just 1 second as I get ready to close out, and then I'll wrap things up here real quick. But I want to thank my special featured guest of the evening, Mark Mattingly, the Executive Vice President of Landscape Golf Management, and also special thanks to my earlier guest, Jon Decker, PGA Professional on the Coach's Corner panel. Thank you, Jon, as always, for bringing your best to the panel discussions. Don't forget, you can visit the iGolf Sports YouTube channel to catch all of the latest broadcasts, including tonight's broadcast as well. And if you want to just listen to the audio version, you can go to Spreaker.com or wherever you listen to your audio podcast. But I want to thank everybody. I want everybody to have a safe and happy Easter holiday weekend as we get ready to roll into the first long weekend and just off of the back of the Masters. Congratulations again to Rory. And just on another note, I just want to remind everybody that if you want to watch the other program I do on Tuesday mornings from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern, here on the same network as well, the Women of Golf with my good friend LPGA professional Cindy Miller. We'll be there, and we speak to many of the great young ladies coming up on the Epson Tour and LPGA Tour as well, and obviously other great individuals helping to elevate and raise women's golf. So make sure you tune into the Women of Golf as well every Tuesday morning. But I'll be back here next Thursday on another Golf Talk Live. Hope you'll join me, and God bless everybody. Have a great weekend, and thank you. We'll see you next time. And
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.